give our viewers a bit of a summary? I know a lot of people have been going to our special website, tamaratrial.com. That's where we have all our coverage, a compilation of your tweets. And I know folks have been following you as you live tweet from the court. But maybe for those of us like me who have been out of the country for more than a week, how would you summarize the first, I guess it's almost 2 full weeks of court? What would you say the highlights and the lowlights have been for the month of September so far?
I'll share with you the grand themes that I think are the major takeaways, and they both intercept. The first one will be that the prosecution, in its opening statement, characterized the Freedom Convoy as a demonstration of protest that was anything but peaceful. That's a direct quote.
Hmm.
Now, for those who've been with Rebel News for a while, paying attention to it or consuming, firsthand content from the Freedom Convoy or were fortunate enough to attend and participate, you'll know that that description is the opposite of the truth. It's not reconcilable with what actually happened. And you can see it sort of echoes this media narrative that was derisive and denigrating the demonstration through dishonesty. Now, how does that relate to the trial? The evidence that's been introduced by both the Crown and the defense contradicts that assessment. And I'll give you specifics. One of the first pieces of evidence introduced by the prosecution was this 11.5 minute video montage compilation that was primarily composed of body cam footage that was captured by police officers on the ground during the Freedom Convoy. Some of it was also aerial surveillance footage. And you would think that the prosecution, which is seeking to secure convictions, would come out with an opening salvo that was very incriminating and that would show a protest as they described it as anything but peaceful. But there was no violence to be seen on that video, except for, and this is also very interesting, the judge herself remarked on that 11.5 minute video. And she said a couple of days into the trial that the only violence that was seen on that video came from a police officer towards a demonstrator. So that's the major thing. The second one, I'll just wrap it up real quick in terms of how this relates to us at Rebel News. This may seem a bit self-serving, but this divide between the characterization of the Freedom Convoy and the reality on the ground blends right into the secondary overarching theme as I see it, which is the parallel universes within which the fictional world of so-called mainstream media and legacy media exists. And those of us on the dissident side, those of us on the honest side, those of us who are not on the take from the government, trying to present our audiences with accurate information. And that weaved into the trial itself. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. Some of the videos that were presented by the prosecution and defense included these press conferences that were held by Tamara Lich, by Chris Barber, and some of their volunteers or supporters. And they would remark regularly on how the characterizations from the media, white supremacists at these protests, races, all these nonsense buzzwords that are regularly used to deride detractors, were not compatible with what you were seeing on the ground, which was shared by both Tamara Lich and Chris Barber with their videos on site. And of course, anyone is welcome to do that themselves. There are still live streams out there that you can see reporting from Rebel News, for example, where Lincoln Jay and others were all out there on the streets of Ottawa capturing hundreds of hours of footage. You can see for yourself that the way CBC types would describe it is not what was actually happening.
Well, you said so many interesting things there. I want to go back to your reference to the judge. A lot of people are worried about the independence of our judicial system, and I'm one of them. Even though I used to be a lawyer and an officer of the court, as they say, I still have a respect for the law. I've got to, because what else is our choice? But still, I can't help but notice that not a single substantial lockdown policy anywhere in the country has been declared unconstitutional. Our Supreme Court hasn't even bothered to hear a lockdown case yet at all. And I think a lot of people are starting to lose faith in the courts. And yet you say that at one moment the judge said something that I think could be characterized as sympathetic to the defense by pointing out that the only violence in a 11-minute video clip by the prosecution was police violence. So I think that's a very interesting thing for the judge to say out loud. Judges normally keep their cards close to their chest and wait until the judgment, the verdict, to give their opinion. Can you tell me anything about the judge. Is she young? Is she old? Is she talkative? Does she ask questions? Does she sort of take a hands-off approach? Have there been other things she has said that maybe suggest she's more sympathetic to Tamara Lich and Chris Barber than might be expected? Give me a little bit on the judge.
Well, since I'm there every day, of course, I can give you insights into her behaviors and her remarks. And I also initially thought that that statement that she made, where she specifically remarked on how the only violence visible in that video, that 11 and a half minute video montage compilation, only came from a police officer towards a demonstrator. And I also use that word, sympathetic, but it's actually more than that. It's really an objective assessment. Even if she is hostile towards the defense for whatever reason, that's an objective remark. It's not a matter of opinion that the only violence seen was from a police officer. But I'll share with you some other observations I've made. And this happened in the last day. So this was Thursday, this was yesterday, in which a video of Brian Peckford's speech at the Freedom Convoy was shared by the defense. And for those that don't know, Brian Peckford was one of the composers, one of the drafters of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which I think we can agree or we can state fairly is sort of foundational legal document in Canada. He was also a former premier in Newfoundland. And Brian Peckford remarked a lot about the violations that you just commented on as a function of what I call the COVID-19 enterprise, this apparatus of censorship, surveillance, violation of your basic rights to movement, to due process, property rights, freedom of association, religious rights. So basically all of our fundamental rights were violated without due process in the auspices of the so-called public health framework.
But don't be fooled by those who try to tell you that somehow you can skirt around the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I was there, I helped write the damn thing, and they're wrong, and we're right.
Now, this relates to the judge how, because when the first video was played of Brian Peckford's remarks, it was kind of blurry. It was sort of this citizen journalist cell phone video. And she had never done this before until this moment. She's like, wait, can you pause that and replay that? She really wanted to confirm that that was Brian Peckford. So Brian Peckford captured her attention, presumably because she's a lady of the law. She's the judge, and Brian Peckford played a central role in a document that ostensibly guides her judgment. Now, just as part of the superficial considerations, she's a woman, obviously. She's middle-aged, probably around 60. She did make a remark about how her comments on Brian Peckford dated her or aged her. In terms of her demeanor, she's quite professional. I wouldn't say she is hands off. She is authoritative when she thinks that things are sort of going off the rails, which is a quote that she used. And she definitely is mindful of not wasting courtroom resources. And I'll give you one more example of that too, in which the prosecution is trying to submit requests to change some of their evidentiary submissions to refine certain evidence that was submitted or introduce these or those witnesses. And she has remarked several times, she stated, almost reprimanded, I would say, the prosecution to Crown for not doing all of these things by August 1st, which apparently was their sort of tentatively agreed upon deadline between all the parties at hand.
Right. And it makes sense because, of course, both sides have to know the case. Well, I mean, or more importantly, the defense, the accused, has to know the case they have to meet. So if the prosecution is changing the game just moments before trial or even during the trial, that does not allow them to make a fair and full defense, especially since the facts at issue here happened a year and a half ago. They're all on tape. It's not like the prosecution just discovered something.